Bluebells forever!
Stepney was returning home after a close call at the smelter's yard. He had spent the day working at the quarry and had gotten lost after delivering a stone train on an old line. Though he usually liked nighttime runs, this night was particularly foggy. Though he now knew he was somewhere along the northern branch lines, neither he nor his driver knew exactly where they were or how to get home. Luckily, they saw the bright red glow of a signal. "Maybe we can ask the signaler where we are," said his driver. Stepney came to a gentle stop outside the signal box. "Driver, I don't think we've taken this route before." "Really? Why is that?" "Because of that." They had stopped in front of an old quarry mine with some buildings that looked like they hadn't been touched for decades, along with some rusty sidings and a lonely shed. Stepney wasn't sure whether to be scared or intrigued. "Evening, you lot," said the signalman. "Haven't exactly picked the best night for a run, have you?" "No one told us about the fog," replied the driver. "Well, that's how it tends to be in this part of the island. Where you heading?" "Bluebell Valley." "Croven's Gate? That's on the other side of the island. What brings you to Maythwaite?" "Well, that's the thing. We've never been here before," explained the driver. "How far is the main line?" "Too far, and I wouldn't recommend trying to reach it tonight. This fog's only getting worse," advised the signalman. "Where can we stay then?" asked Stepney. "Well, there is that old shed over there by the mine. It's not pretty, but it'll have to do," the signalman replied. "Whatever are you doing so late on this old line?" interrupted Stepney's driver. "I was assigned to this box not long ago for the restoration of Toby's line." He paused as he stared at the old buildings, seemingly deep in thought. "I've heard stories about this place and some of its incidents." "What kind of stories?" Stepney inquired. "Well, they're rather unpleasant. I sometimes hear noises coming from the mines, as if there are people in there. But that's impossible, seeing as all the mines have collapsed. Figured it must be in my head." He turned to Stepney's crew. "You two are welcome to stay in the box with me." Stepney backed down slowly into the old shed. He didn't like it, but he much preferred it to the scrapyard he'd ended up in earlier. But Stepney had something else on his mind. "What do you think the signalman was talking about?" "Not sure, but I'd start hearing things too if I were stuck in this place all night," said his driver. "Can we get to the box?" urged the fireman. "I can't stand another second out here." "Sorry, Stepney," sighed his driver. "I wish we had better shelter than this." "It's all right, we've had worse," eased Stepney. "It's better than the cold sidings of the scrapyard." His crew wished him good night and turned in. Stepney was now truly alone. The fog grew so heavy that he could barely see in front of him, making him feel as if he were completely secluded. He wasn't sure if he'd fall asleep, but eventually his eyes grew heavy and he dozed off peacefully.
"Hello? Is anyone there?"
Stepney was suddenly awoken. He surveyed the deserted buildings but couldn't see anyone. But he knew he had heard someone.
"Hello? Can anyone hear me?"
The voice echoed as if it were coming from a cave. It could only be one thing. Stepney looked toward the mine. "Wait, is someone in there?"
"Help! Someone please help!"
came a second voice.
"Is anyone there? I'm trapped!"
called a third. Stepney didn't know exactly how many were in there, but he knew he had to respond so they would be heard. He couldn't imagine being trapped in a mine with no way out. He was about to reply, but then went stiff with fear upon remembering what the signalman had said. All the mines had collapsed. No one could have gotten in or out. Several more voices cried out, expressing nothing but horror and panic. All Stepney could do was listen helplessly, but whether it was possible for anyone to be in there, he couldn't ignore them any longer.
"Who's there? Where are you?"
He was interrupted by another noise, the sound of rocks crumbling. The cries for help were now replaced by screams of terror. Stepney was petrified. He felt like crying as the screams grew louder and longer. Then there was silence. No more crumbling, no more screaming, just complete silence. Stepney couldn't pull himself out of the shock he was in. It just didn't add up. He couldn't even think of sleeping after the horrors he'd just witnessed. But his distress turned to exhaustion, and he fell asleep once more. Morning came, and when his crew came to check on him, Stepney was very pale. "Are you okay?" asked his driver. "No, I heard noises coming from the mines." "What? Are you serious?" "I wish I wasn't." "Were they the sounds of people crying for help?" All eyes turned to the signalman. "Yes," whimpered Stepney. "How did you—" "What are you talking about? You know something about this?" said the driver. "I did say something last night. I used to wonder if I were imagining them, but after what your engine just said, I only wish I had." There was a long silence. "You said you had heard stories about this mine," Stepney said at last. "Unpleasant stories. Do they have something to do with what I heard last night?" The signalman sighed and slowly nodded his head. "This mine operated on the old tramway. It wasn't open very long, but it was known as one of the most dangerous places on Sodor. The equipment was out of date and the shafts weren't well maintained. That led to several collapses. If the people in charge had actually cared about creating safe working conditions, it would have been open longer. I always saw those accidents as murders. Those who survived testified, and eventually the mine was shut down." Stepney and his crew were speechless. "When I was assigned to this box, I was scared at first hearing the screams of the suffering miners, but eventually I realized there was nothing I could do but serve as some company for the unlucky souls." The signalman called ahead to clear the line, and Stepney continued on his way home. He didn't feel scared anymore, but was quite sad. When he finally returned to Bluebell Valley, he barely said a word, not even to Rusty. Instead, he sat in his shed processing his intense journey, until eventually his mind was at enough peace to get some proper rest. Stepney still helps out on Sir Topham Hatt's railroad. He is happy to assist the branch line engines whenever they're in need of an extra set of buffers. But chills run through his boiler whenever he passes Maithwaite. He hopes that someday the screaming will stop and the souls of the poor miners will finally be at peace.